Hello everyone. In this video, we'll see how some criminals tried to mock, insult, or threaten the judges and the jury, only to face harsher consequences for their actions. Are you ready to see some justice served? Let's get started. Jordan Wright. Our first story is about Jordan Wright, a 19-year-old who was convicted of murdering his ex-girlfriend, Maggie Roscoe, in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Wright stabbed Roscoe 22 times in her apartment, then fled the scene and tried to cover up his crime. He was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, which carries a mandatory sentence of life in prison without parole. During the trial, Wright showed no remorse for his actions. He smirked and laughed as the prosecution presented the evidence against him. He even winked at Roscoe's family and friends, who were sitting in the courtroom. His behavior was so disrespectful and infuriating that the judge had to warn him several times to stop, but Wright didn't listen. He continued to act like he was above the law, and that he had nothing to lose. Well, he was wrong. The judge was so appalled by Wright's attitude that he decided to add an extra twist to his sentence. He ordered Wright to be transferred to the Marquette Branch Prison, which is located in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, about 500 miles away from Ann Arbor. The judge said that Wright would be isolated from his family and friends and that he would have to endure the harsh winters and the brutal conditions of the prison. He also said that Wright would have to look at Roscoe's picture every day, and that he hoped that Wright would suffer for the rest of his life. Alan Bacardi. Our next story is about Alan Bacardi, a 47-year-old man who was arrested for threatening to kill his ex-wife and her new boyfriend. Bacardi had a history of domestic violence and stalking, and he had violated several restraining orders. He was also a self-proclaimed sovereign citizen, which means that he believed that he was not subject to any laws or authorities. When Bacardi appeared in court, he was anything but cooperative. He refused to acknowledge the judge or the charges against him. He shouted obscenities and racial slurs at the court staff and the officers. He claimed that he was a free man and that he had the right to bear arms and defend himself. He also said that he would kill anyone who tried to stop him. The judge was not amused by Bacardi's antics. He ordered him to be removed from the courtroom and held in contempt of court. But Bacardi didn't go quietly. He resisted the officers and tried to spit on them. He also continued to yell and curse at the judge, even as he was being dragged away. The judge then added more charges to Bacardi's case, including assault, battery, and resisting arrest. He also set his bail at $1 million, which Bacardi had no chance of paying. Bacardi ended up spending more time in jail than he bargained for, and he faced a long and difficult trial. Michael Ray. Our third story is about Michael Ray, a 36-year-old man who was arrested for burglary and grand theft. Ray had broken into a home and stolen several items, including a laptop, a camera, and a gun. He was caught on surveillance video and identified by the homeowners. He was also linked to several other burglaries in the area. When Ray appeared in court for his bond hearing, he seemed to find the whole situation hilarious. He laughed and smiled as the judge read the charges against him. He also made sarcastic comments and gestures, such as rolling his eyes and shaking his head. He acted like he didn't care about the consequences of his actions, and that he was confident that he would get out of jail soon. But Ray's laughter soon turned to tears when the judge announced his bond. The judge set Ray's bond at $250,000, which was much higher than the usual amount for his crimes. Ray was shocked and devastated by the judge's decision. He begged and pleaded for a lower bond, but the judge didn't budge. Ray realized that he had made a huge mistake by laughing in the face of justice, and that he would have to pay the price. Tobias Roman. Our fourth story is about Tobias Roman, a 25-year-old man who was arrested for driving under the influence and causing a crash that injured two people. Roman had a blood alcohol level of 0.18, which is more than twice the legal limit. He also had a suspended license and a prior DUI conviction. When Roman appeared in court, he behaved very strangely. He wore a bright orange jumpsuit and a pair of sunglasses. He also had a smirk on his face and a slouch in his posture. He seemed to think that he was in a comedy show rather than a serious legal proceeding. He made jokes and wisecracks, and he tried to flirt with the female prosecutor. He also interrupted the judge and the lawyers, and he refused to answer any questions. The judge was not amused by Roman's antics. He warned him to stop his disruptive behavior and to take the matter seriously, but Roman didn't listen. He continued to act like a clown, and he even threatened to kill the judge and the prosecutor. He said that he had connections in the underworld and that he would make them pay for putting him in jail. He also said that he didn't care about the victims of the crash and that he would do it again if he had the chance. The judge had enough of Roman's nonsense. He ordered him to be removed from the courtroom and held in contempt of court. He also added more charges to Roman's case, including threatening a public official, obstructing justice, and disorderly conduct. He also set his bail at $500,000. Roman ended up facing a long and harsh sentence for his crimes, and he learned that being a joker in court is no laughing matter. Milton Watts. Our fifth story is about Milton Watts, a 42-year-old man who was convicted of robbery and assault. Watts was caught by the police and identified by the clerk and the surveillance video. He was found guilty by a jury and faced a minimum of 10 years in prison. During the sentencing hearing, Watts had a meltdown. He swore and cursed at the judge, the jury, and the prosecutor. He said that he was innocent and that he was framed by the police. He also said that he hated the court system and that he wished that everyone would die. He was so loud and angry that he had to be restrained by the officers. The judge was not impressed by Watts's outburst. He then sentenced Watts to 25 years in prison, which was more than double the minimum. He also added a year of contempt of court for each time that Watts swore or insulted the court, which amounted to 12 years. Watts ended up with a total of 37 years in prison, which was one of the longest sentences ever given for contempt of court. He realized that he had dug his own grave with his swearing spree, and that he had no one to blame but himself. Darrell Brooks. Our sixth story is about Darrell Brooks, a 39-year-old man who was responsible for the Waukesha Christmas parade attack, which killed 6 people and injured more than 60 others. He was charged with 6 counts of first-degree intentional homicide. During the trial, Brooks showed no remorse or empathy for his actions. He disrupted the proceedings with his outbursts and his rants. He claimed that he was a victim of a conspiracy and that he was being persecuted for his political views. He also accused the judge, the jury, and the witnesses of being biased and corrupt. He said that he didn't recognize the authority of the court and that he would not accept any verdict or sentence. The judge was not swayed by Brooks's claims. He sentenced Brooks to 6 life sentences without parole, 1 for each of his victims. He also added 10 years for each of the injured people, which amounted to 600 years. Cameo Gant. Our 7th story is about Cameo Gant, a 22-year-old woman who was arrested for shoplifting and resisting arrest. She was caught and taken to the police station, where she was charged with petty theft and obstruction of justice. When Gant appeared in court, she was very provocative and defiant. She also had a smirk on her face and a snarky tone in her voice. She tried to seduce the judge and the prosecutor, and she made rude and inappropriate comments. She also denied any wrongdoing, and she said that she was a victim of discrimination and harassment. The judge sentenced Gant to 6 months in jail, which was the maximum penalty for her charges. He also added a special condition to her sentence. He ordered Gant to wear duct tape over her mouth whenever she was in court, to prevent her from speaking or making any noises. He said that this was a way to teach Gant a lesson and to protect the dignity of the court. Ebony Burks. Our 8th and final story is about Ebony Burks, a 28-year-old woman who was arrested for driving under the influence and causing a hit-and-run accident. She was eventually stopped and arrested, and she had a blood alcohol level of 0.15, which is almost twice the legal limit. When Burks appeared in court, she was very disrespectful and disruptive. She interrupted the judge and the lawyers, and she refused to follow the court's instructions. She also made excuses and lies, and she blamed the other driver for the accident. She said that she was not drunk and that she had a medical condition that affected her breathalyzer test. She also said that she had an important job and a family to take care of, and that she couldn't afford to go to jail. The judge sentenced Burks to 1 year in jail, which was the maximum penalty for her charges. He also suspended her license and ordered her to pay restitution to the victims. Burks was furious and frustrated by the judge's decision. She had a meltdown and started to scream and cry. She said that the judge was unfair and biased and that he had ruined her life. Well, that's it for this video of rude defendants getting instant karma in court. What do you think of these cases? Do you think the judges were fair or harsh? Keep those questions coming.